What's going on, everybody? Patrick Auger with Mr. Matthew Wells, and we're here today to talk about the announcement of Bellator having a light heavyweight World Grand Prix. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Another World Grand Prix in the light heavyweight division, which is very stacked at the moment. This might be one of their best Grand Prix. Now, aside from the announcement of the light heavyweight tournament, we also had the announcement that Bellator is going to be on Showtime. And there are a couple of other fights going to be booked. We've got Pitbull versus Sanchez 2. We'll cover that in a different video. And obviously, their first fight is starting in April instead of February. That's a little bit different than what they had originally said, but still coming up. It's going to be a big April between that and PFL going on. It's a whole thing. But this focus is going to be on the light heavyweight Grand Prix. And Matt, just looking at this tournament bracket, right? 8 fighters. And I'll run through them real quick. You got Ryden Bader fighting Lyoto Machida April 9th. You got Corey Anderson fighting Dovletdzhan Yagshimuradov. That's definitely wrong, but you know,
nailed it.
Get at me, get at me in the comments about that. Nemkkov, Vadim Nemkkov, current light heavyweight champion, fighting Phil Davis on April 16th. Anthony Johnson fighting Yoel Romero, by far the most enticing matchup right out the gate. I love that they did that. We'll get into that. And that's your bracket. Then the winners of each of those bouts will fight each other in July, and then the final is set to be in October. Matt, first of all, just regarding the entire announcement, as well as the other stuff you want to go into the Showtime and whatnot, well, what's your reaction here? What's your reaction about this big announcement for Bellator? Did it live up to the hype? We got 2 things saying,
yeah,
this is announcement's coming. Did it live up to the hype?
Well, listen, I am glad that this entire announcement that they teased for, what was it, about a week? They teased this announcement now. That I'm glad that the only announcement wasn't that they're going to Showtime, because they came right out of the gate with that, like, hey, we're going back to Showtime, and I was like, was that what you could have tweeted that? That could have been a tweet.
It's a big deal, man. Hey, it's a big deal, man.
To some people, I'm sure it is a big deal. To me, I was very disappointed when I was like, that can't be it. And then they hit us with the Grand Prix, which is significantly more entertaining and significantly more interesting, especially the way that they laid out this bracket. Because all of these fights, like, there's not a home run like pick in this bracket if you're trying to pick a winner. All of these fights are interesting. All of them can go either way depending on how they play out, and that's one of the things I love about doing a Grand Prix, doing a tournament in general. It eliminates the guesswork that we do when we're talking about like UFC and determining, you know, what's coming next. Like, no, it's right there. It's on a bracket. You know what's coming, right? And I love that. As far as the matchups go, the most intriguing one, like you said, everyone is talking about Anthony Rumble Johnson and Yoel Romero. I'm not sold that fight's going to be great, right? I'm really not, because look at how their UFC tenures ended. They weren't the most exciting of fights, you know, in my opinion. Yoel, it seemed like, you know, he was leaving a lot in the gas tank, a lot left to be desired in his fights. Anthony was kind of in there, you know, he was like, hey, if I can knock you out, cool. If not, okay, you're going to take me down and I'll just give up at that point kind of thing. But, you know, I hope they both come out swinging on that one, or I hope they both really, you know, kind of channel their primes in that matchup, because it has potential to be really, really great. And on the flip side, it also has potential to be really, really boring too. I'm hoping that it's on the exciting side, because all of these other matchups, I think, will be exciting to some degree. Like I said, it's hard to pick a winner on here. I'm sure some people have strong opinions about who they think will win this thing, and we'll get to that, I'm sure at some point. But overall, this announcement, as the second part of their big teaser announcement, definitely was worth the wait, I think, if I had to gauge that, you know. So I'm not mad at them for hitting us with a Grand Prix, because I wish the UFC would do it just once. Just give me one. Just give me one next year. UFC, do it, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's somebody tweeted out, forget who did this. Somebody tweeted out, you've got Ryzen with the featherweight Grand Prix. You've got Bellator with the light heavyweight Grand Prix. You've got PFL with their tournament format, which is essentially one giant Grand Prix. And then you've got the potential of Conor McGregor fighting for a title against Dustin Poirier coming off of a loss. So I hear what you're saying about the UFC needing a Grand Prix there, because it would be amazing. In terms of the announcement, my reaction, I was doubly excited because I am one of the few nerds who Showtime being the new home for Bellator is a big deal from a business perspective. So I get to talk about that. You'll see that on the Fight Business podcast when that comes out later this week. But, the light heavyweight Grand Prix is obviously the cream of the crop here. And we will get to our predictions in terms of who we think is going to take this. Our expert minds going to break this down, give it who's got the best chance of taking this. But just overall, I love the matchups out the gate. I love them not being afraid and trying to line up something like an Anthony Johnson versus Yoel Romero on either side of the brackets, right? Because you could hypothetically set it up so, okay, you've got some crazy fight that's going to come down, and maybe you get those two in the final, or maybe you get a Romero Bader or something in the final, which could happen. But you're starting out the gate with tough matchups for everybody. I feel like it's no gimmies here. It's Machida has, despite being older, still out there winning fights, still looking pretty good in some of his fights, even if they're not the crazy KOs we're used to. You've got Corey Anderson versus this wild card here. That's what I'm calling him. I think that could be a good one. You've got Nemkkov versus Davis, which that should be an interesting matchup. Again, it was a close fight the last time. That's a rematch, so it should be very interesting to see where that goes. And then you've got Yoel versus Johnson. And I'm going to disagree with what you said a little bit in terms of, I think it's going to be extremely exciting. And here's why. Because you're right that each of their last performances were rough, but they were going up against, some of the best in their respective divisions, right? I mean, if you look at DC versus Johnson, I mean, DC's whole thing was wrestling. That was his main, kind of weapon. And so for him to go out there and get the victory over Johnson the way he did makes sense. Yoel has wrestling, but he hasn't used it in a long time. He likes to stand in the pocket. And if you watch, yes, Yoel versus Izzy was atrocious, but I would also argue it was one of the closest fights Izzy has had since his ascension. And I had scored it technically for Romero, as bad as that fight was, but it was a way to neutralize Izzy, which he did successfully. He wasn't able to capitalize on enough to, land some big knockout or do enough damage where he clearly won. But that's probably the best opponent in terms of someone Izzy has fought so far. He's pretty much dominated everybody else. So I think this will be a firefight. I think this is going to be looking like how Rumble looked against Glover Teixeira and how Romero looked against Costa, which was a just straight up banger. So I am really pinning my hopes on that. You are correct. It could end up being boring, but I don't know. I think it's going to be, until one of them goes to sleep, I think it's going to be so good. So now that we've talked about our reactions to the announcement, we both feel satisfied the announcement lived up to the hype. We gotta give our early predictions on who's gonna win this thing. Before we do, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. You haven't done that already, hit the notification button so that you know when we're dropping new videos. And if you have any videos you'd like us to make, let us know. We are making fan content. We've got a video coming out. I think it might be around this time, or might even be before this video, where we're talking about path of fighters to get to the UFC, how a fighter comes up and his best option to get to the UFC. That was a fan request. Let us know. We're happy to talk about things that you guys want to talk about. So let us know in the comments. That all being said, Mr. Wells, it's time. Early prediction. And we're talking very early here. And we will break down each of these fights in subsequent videos. But for just an overall tournament early prediction here, who do you have winning the light heavyweight Grand Prix?
Well, early prediction without going into much detail about why I'm choosing this person. I'm just going to say Nemkkov is going to win.
Nemkkov.
That's my early prediction. I'm going to say Nemkkov gets it done. Later, I will explain why, but that's my first initial impression based on how the bracket is laid out.
Ooh, interesting. Not a bad choice. I would put him up there. But for me, without going into it too much, I'm going to go with recent signee, Yoel Romero, the soldier of God, the timeless man, the man who just defies all time. Going with him. And I will also break down in a later video why I think Yoel is going to take this whole thing.
I cannot wait to hear this. Sir.
It should be a good one. I can't wait to hear your Nemkkov one. This should be,
I'll just say this. I won't give my technical reasons yet, but I will say I'm thinking Bellator hopes Nemkkov gets it done because he's the sole true Bellator representative in this whole thing. Everybody else are, I initially said about the Anthony Johnson, Yoel matchup. I was like, oh, they're trying to just knock off one of the UFC guys early, try to get one of those guys out of there. And then you look at the whole bracket, you're like, wait a second, everybody else is UFC fighters except for Nemkkov and the guy that Corey Anderson's facing. I don't want to butcher his name. So Bellator, I guarantee you they're rooting on for Nemkkov to go out there and show out for the promotion.
That's probably very true. Yeah, if Nemkkov can get through this tournament, especially if we can do it unscathed and win dominantly, that's just big boost to the promotion, especially on top of what Michael Chandler was able to do to Dan Hooker. I mean, that's just, that would be sweet music to Scott Coker's and Bellator's ears. But let us know in the comments who you think is going to win this. Give us your early prediction on who you think is going to win the light heavyweight tournament. Knowing my luck, and Matt's luck probably too, we're probably going to end up seeing Anthony Johnson versus Phil Davis in the second round, with both of our picks being knocked out immediately. But 100%. Let us know who you think is going to win. And yeah, April can't get here soon enough, man.